The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Climate Resilience Evaluation and Awareness Tool, or CREAT, helps you consider how the threats that impact your utility today may change in the future based on projected climate data. CREAT also helps you consider multiple possible scenarios of changes in climate, which can increase your resilience to all types of future events. Using CREAT, you have reviewed climate change information and considered how these changes may impact your utility. Now, you are ready to begin the Scenario Development module. In CREAT's Scenario Development module, you will develop climate scenarios in 5 logical steps. First, you identify the threats that you want to consider during your risk assessment. Next, you define a baseline scenario to understand your current risk from threats. Then, you consider your future time period or planning horizon. Based on that time period, you design additional scenarios of projected changes in future climate. Finally, based on the climate data that you used in your scenarios, you develop specific definitions for your threats. By following these steps, you will learn how to consider threats and their impact on your utility both today and in the future. In Step 1 of this module, you'll identify threats, starting with the 5 types provided in CREAT. You can select from these threats or define your own. You are encouraged, but not limited, to select a few threats that are of most concern to you and your utility. So, how do you define these threats to assess risk to your utility? Each threat depends on climate conditions, like temperature and precipitation. Understanding how climate drives different threats is critical to your risk assessment. Let's start with what you already know by building your baseline scenario in Step 2 of this module. Your baseline scenario represents your current threat conditions based on your utility experience and historical climate conditions. This scenario is the foundation for developing other projected scenarios, which describe how threats might change in the future. In Step 3 of this module, you will select a time period for your assessment. The time period spans from a start year, corresponding to your baseline scenario, to an end year that would align with projected climate data available to you in CREAT. As a strategy for selecting your time period, consider questions such as, do you have a planning horizon in mind for climate adaptation? Do you want to be consistent with your capital improvement or watershed management plans? Your answers to these questions can help you set the years of your time period. Projected scenarios are developed in Step 4 of this module. Using the data from your baseline scenario as a starting point, CREAT provides projected changes in temperature, precipitation, extreme weather, and sea level rise. The projections in CREAT represent a range of potential future climate conditions, from hotter and drier to wetter and stormier. You will want to review the CREAT data and consider how your threats will change in response to these future climate conditions. In the 5th and last step of this module, you will define your threats for all of your scenarios. Consider any recent experiences with these events and your climate-related current concerns. Are there vulnerable locations at your utility? Which critical assets have thresholds for damage that could be exceeded by a certain threat magnitude? Would projected changes in climate alter the frequency, magnitude, or extent of certain events? Think through your understanding of climate science, your knowledge of historical events, and how similar or worse events might impact your utility. Based on this knowledge, you can use your best judgment to define your threats with as much detail as possible. You are now ready to begin developing your climate scenarios in this module of CREAT. When all 5 steps are finished, you can generate a report that lists your utility-specific scenarios and threats. Next, in the Consequences and Assets module, you will identify the types of losses you may experience at your utility if your threats occur, and critical assets you will address in your risk assessment. Plan, prepare, and build resilience to a changing climate with EPA's CREAT.